Hello, friend, and welcome. You're familiar with the phrase going back to the drawing board. Well, that's kind of where we are now, just going to look at the Revelation 12 sign. Some new signs have presented themselves and are active right now in the heavens, and we will take a look at those. Those are signs that I didn't recognize before, but I can identify now. Not that I have a background in astrology, but I'm learning to see and point out the signs in the Bible and parallel those with what's going on in the heavens. So, as is our custom, let's go ahead and take a look at the Bible. Lord, please show us great and marvelous things in your word. And we are taken to Jeremiah 51. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. Verse 58, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Babylon's thick wall will be leveled, and her high places set on fire. The peoples exhaust themselves for nothing. The nation's labor is only fuel for the flames. There's nothing that we can do to prevent this thing from coming, the judgment that's about to befall Babylon. And God's been showing me a lot of things, in Ezekiel, it talks about an eagle with diverse plumage. And I'm going to start looking at that a little bit more. It's in context. I think one passage is in context with Assyria, another in context with Babylon. But basically, if you think of diversity, diverse colors, Babylon, how Babylon planted its seeds and, grew things from those seeds and then destroyed them. So I do know that the eagle is mentioned quite a few times in the book of Revelation. It is mentioned in Revelation 12, which we are going to look at. I don't plan on looking at Ezekiel today, but I am already studying for that lesson. And it is also written in believe it's in chapter 11 with the two witnesses at the end of that chapter. We have the eagle mentioned, maybe mentioned in another passage. So we'll see how that plays out in the heavens, also spiritually. So let's go ahead. We have done numerous studies covering the entire book of Revelation. This time, previously it's been mostly with the King James Version, but I'd like to look at the Geneva version. It is also an older version that is very reputable in terms of its veracity and accuracy. A few weeks back, we did look at chapters 4 and 5, and it's interesting how those scriptures talk about the 24 elders. And if you look at ancient star maps here, let me get one pulled up in just a second. I do want to go through this opening slide. So we will be looking at Revelation 12. We're going to look at Mars and Saturn in opposition right now. They did have a conjunction. Let's see. I want to say last winter they were in conjunction. We'll take a look at that. And then the woman at the end of Revelation 12 does escape between the constellations of Hydra, the water snake, representing the flood of water at the end of the chapter, and Aquila, the eagle. So let's go ahead and start breaking some of this down. We're going to look at some of the time frames associated with Revelation 12, and then I wanted to touch just very briefly on Revelation 4 and 5 that talks about the 24 elders. If we look at an ancient star map, we'll see that there are 24 constellations or thereabout. I haven't been able to necessarily narrow down the exact characters, but there are a number of constellations that could represent the 24 elders. We've got the 12 signs of the Mazzaroth. Ophiuchus is also kind of in that ecliptic line as well. just recently. We also have Aquila, which isn't in the ecliptic plane, but is mentioned as the eagle in Revelation. Other characters include Orion with the double-edged sword. You can kind of see him over here. Well, it's kind of jumping around, but I'll have this link below. We also have Boots, which equipped Mars with the great dagger. We've got Hercules, right there is Aphuicus. Auriga is the shepherd here. We've got Perseus, who slayed Medusa, Andromeda, and she was mentioned as part of the Revelation 6 sign with the sixth seal, every free and bondsman, every king and ruler. I believe actually it says every bondsman and ruler. And the rulers up here, her parents, Cassiopeia and Cephas. So I'll have that link below if you want to take a look at that. There are also a number of characters that have horns. And in chapter 5, I believe it is, Jesus Christ is described as a lamb having 7 eyes and 7 horns. Characters with horns, well, we've got 2 from Aries, 2 horns from Taurus, 2 horns from Capricorn. And you don't see it in this rendition, but there is actually a unicorn, Monoceros. You can find that in Stellarium. And let's get that pulled up right now. You see Monoceros right here, the unicorn right below Gemini, and right next to the club of Orion. Also nearby is Auriga the shepherd. And beside him is Perseus. And actually, Gemini has 2 characters, so that could be 2 characters in terms of the 24 elders. Is Cancer a character? Is Libra a character? These are things, that I'm planning on pursuing for further study, and I am happy to extend that invitation to everyone else here as well. So before we read Revelation 12, I just want to put this in context. For time's sake, I'm just going to do a high-level overview. Chapter 1, we're introduced to the risen Lord. Also, the white horseman, our judge. Chapter 2 and 3, we have the letters to the churches. 4 and 5, more background, the scene in heaven. We have the 24 elders. We've got the 7 stars, 7 candlesticks. We also have the green aurora surrounding the throne of God, surrounding space. And then we have the 10,000 angels also representing the stars. We have the 4 living creatures with stars before and behind their wings, also, or the eyes, also representing stars. Chapter 6, we've got the judgments. Chapter 7, we see post seal 6. The 144,000 are sealed, they're equipped, they're washing their robes. And then in chapter 8, we see the 7th seal. And after a half hour of silence, there's earthquakes and lightnings and thunderings. And it's a very violent situation itself with that 7th seal. Then it opens into the trumpets, also very violent and drastic judgments. We see in the heavens that these do take place chronologically. Chapter 9, a continuation of the trumpet judgments with trumpet 5 and 6, also known as the first and second woe. And we will see those declared, I believe it's in chapter 11, pronounced by a flying eagle. So all of these things are intertwined. We're introduced to the setting, introduced to the judgments, and then after chapter 10, the writer of John is given a little book similar to Ezekiel, perhaps either Jeremiah or Isaiah as well. Once they get that little book, it tastes sweet in the mouth as we talk about the end of the world, the judgments. that's kind of the way it is. It's, oh, it's sweet in the mouth. Let's tight. Let's taste it. Let's talk about it. Let's send pictures to our friends of it. Whatever. But when it actually happens, it's going to be very bitter. It's going to be like, I believe it's in Ezekiel, where, the Lord is like, why are your men grabbing their stomachs like they're in travail? Well, as we see from Matthew 24, as we see from Revelation 12, that's pretty much what's happening is the travail, the pains in the stomach. And then from Revelation 11, we see an introduction again of a heavenly scene where the temple is being measured. We have those in the inner courts who are protected, and then those in the outer courts who weren't filling their lamps with oil, who weren't spending time with God, who weren't worshiping Him, maybe talking about Him, but not in true repentance and prayer and seeking Him with humility. They may have been, just caught up in the television. They may have been caught up in YouTube videos about the end times, but not really seeking God first through His Word and prayer and petition and fasting for guidance. Um, and then so we have the inner court, and then Revelation 11 tells us that the people outside of that inner court will be trampled down by the Gentiles for, I believe it says, a times and half a time. I believe either that or 1260 days, 42 months, one of those time descriptors. From there, we see the two witnesses, and that's what I'm getting to at this moment. The Revelation 12 woman, she is introduced as a character after the two witnesses. So we do need to keep in mind that even though their stories are separate, I mean, with the two witnesses, describes their entire story up until the very end, where they are taken up at the end of the second woe, also known as the sixth trumpet, which itself is an hour, a day, a month, and a year. So about a year and a month in length. Then we are introduced to the woman, and that's where we're going to pick it up today. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. With the Geneva Bible, it does have a little bit of an introduction. It does have these notes here, so every now and then I may pause and just kind of take a look at what the note is. I may not. But you are free to, I'll have this link below, you're free to go ahead and dig into those notes a little bit more if anything needs to be clarified. They are pretty exhaustive. Chapter 12, Lord, thank you, and please bless the hearing of your word. A woman appeareth travailing or giving birth or in labor with child, whose child the dragon would devour. But Michael overcomes him and casts him out. And the more he is cast down and vanquished, the more fiercely he exercised his subtleties, his wrath. And the way that this introduction makes it sound is that it is protracted, that it takes place over time and intensifies. So we'll look at that that perspective as we read through this. So a couple things that when we look at the signs in the heavens, we're going to look at the Mars and Saturn conjunction, Mars being the red planet, representing the red horseman, and then Saturn, the pale horseman, representing the rider of the fourth horse, death, followed closely by Hades. So doesn't happen very often that Saturn and Pluto are together like 150 years. I mean, it's not a typical occurrence. So for it to happen during the same time span as the Revelation 12 sign, as the signs from Revelation chapter 6, this is a big deal. The last time the Revelation 12 sign happened was in 1293, after the Crusades. Back in 1290, there was a teaching that went out that said, oh, Revelation isn't talking about 1290 days or 1260 days. I think it's Daniel that talks about 1290 days. It's talking about years. So that's in part what sparked the Crusades. They were going to bring the kingdom of heaven in their own way. And perhaps they did know about the Revelation 12 sign. If you look at the Renaissance, there's a lot of art about the book of Revelation, about the dragon, about the disciple or the apostle John. So, yeah, there was a sign similar to the Revelation 12 sign, but it wasn't in tandem with death and Hades being close together or the other signs from Revelation chapter 6. So we do have to take this whole book together in context. So speaking of the Revelation 12 sign, verse 1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon was under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and cried, travailing in birth, and was pained, ready to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, for behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child, and she had brought it forth. And verse 4, we're going to see a little bit later in the chapter. So don't get too hung up on, oh, why didn't this happen along with the Revelation 12 sign? We're going to get to that in just a moment later in the chapter. Verse 5. So she brought forth a man-child which should rule all nations with a rod of iron, and that her child was taken up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was a battle in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought, and his angels, but they prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, was cast out, which deceiveth all the world. He was even cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now is salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast out, which deceiveth all the world. He was even cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So this part is being mentioned here. So if we're taking it in chronological order, this is where we would see Satan being cast out after the war with Michael. Verse 10, Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now is salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. But they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, which hath great wrath, knowing that he hath but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which had brought forth the man-child. Okay, let's see. We're going to stop right there. We do only have a few more verses, but we're going to stop right there. So here we are at stellarium-web.org, and most of us are familiar with the Revelation 12 sign. We're going to look at that briefly. And in fact, we can just jump to it by going back to 2017, September 23rd. We're going to adjust our filters here and take a look at Virgo. And so the woman is clothed with the sun. She has the moon at her feet over here. And she is giving birth to Jupiter. Jupiter went retrograde in the womb of Virgo for 9 months. I believe that there was the conception comet that passed through even before those 9 months. I mean, it's pretty, or at the beginning of those 9 months. We see Vesta named or a symbol of the Virgin Bride, home and hearth. And then we've got the 3 planets here along with the 9 stars of Leo making up the 12 crowns of the woman. Again, this happened in 2017. We looked at chapter 4 of Revelation to see the next sign. It was kind of in chapters 4 and 5. That actually happened 2018 when the sun was near the crown constellations. We have a northern and a southern crown. The southern crown is near Sagittarius over here, and then the northern crown near Hercules, and the sun going in conjunction with Jupiter, which the woman had just given birth symbolically with a Revelation 12 sign. And here we see Jupiter representing Christ being given crowns and going in conjunction with the sun. Just happens to be, the next time the sun goes in conjunction with Jupiter after the birth is now when he is being strengthened and praised. We've got the crowns, we've got the altar aura here. We have a Fuicus representing the Christ Redeemer wrestling the serpent. We also have one of the living creatures, Aquila, nearby, and the harps, the Lyra constellation over here as well. And this is, again, right next to White Horseman, Sagittarius. Jupiter, during the sign, is right between the claws of Scorpio and Libra, the scales. So a lot of symbology. We've got messenger Mercury showing up right at the exact times when the sun is in conjunction with Mercury, or at least Mercury is nearby when Jupiter and the sun are in conjunction. So definitely a hit there with the crowns, with the harps singing, proclaiming Jesus Christ. Could be some symbology here. I'm not going to go into this comet right now, just for time's sake. So this is 2018. We've got validation for the identity of Jupiter, not only with the Revelation 12 sign, but here with the Revelation 4-5 sign. Revelation 6, Jupiter, next time the sun goes around, will be equipped with the bow under the living creature Aquila over here. Aquila will be calling Jupiter into that position shortly. So for the sun to go into conjunction with Jupiter at this time, in chronological order, it's not just by chance. This is planned and designed. If you're wondering what this planet is, it is Saturn. And if you recall, in 2020, Saturn and Jupiter did have that conjunction. Saturn's kind of hanging out here in Sagittarius constellation of the White Horseman, while Jesus Christ is the one who's actually being crowned and given these accolades. Saturn is nearby, hanging out in that constellation, trying to garner and steal that praise. Now, if we look at Michael, if we look at Mars and the conjunction with Saturn between those two planets, well, that's not going to happen for a while now. Mars being in Aquarius. And if you look at Aquarius over here, I mean, I haven't really touched on it, but Aquarius is trying to resuscitate this fish here at his foot. If you look over, the next constellation after Aquarius is Pisces. And we have one that is upright and one that is lukewarm and worldly, the southerly fish. So the constellations, they do declare the glory of God, just as the 24 elders do in the book of Revelation. The 10,000 stars declare his glory. The eyes on the wings of the four living creatures declare his glory. The cherubim of Ezekiel, having the face of the man, the wings of an eagle, they all represent the heavens. And it's sad that studying the stars has been demonized, but we're doing our best to overcome that. So the next time that Mars and Saturn will be in conjunction, let me pull that up. So Mars and Saturn did go into conjunction in 2022 with Venus nearby, and that was in Capricorn and underneath the arm of Aquarius. Capricorn representing transition or change, and that's very much how it's playing out in this case, especially with Saturn transitioning into some sort of an Antichrist figure here. Venus nearby making her escape, and Mars confronting Saturn. Again, April 2022. Fast forward to today, and these two planets are in what's known as opposition. We're going to go to the planets today to see what that looks like. So when we look at Mars, right there, they are opposing each other. I think it takes about 3.5 years for Mars to transit all the way around the sun. So about 1.5 years after, well, let's see, it hasn't quite been 1.5 years later. We've got this conjunction here, opposition with Saturn and Mars, representing that war in heaven, or the continuation of the war in heaven as suggested by that intro to Revelation chapter 12. And then flipping back over here to Stellarium, we see Mars in Cancer. In the Mazzaroth, it is the sheepfold representing heaven. So definitely Revelation signs and wonders are appearing. A war in heaven between Mars at opposition with Saturn, and Saturn still being in Aquarius. Saturn's going to be there for a long time. It is a slow moving planet. Right over there. So jumping back over here to Mars, we see Venus is right behind Mars in the constellation of Friendship, Rapture, Gemini, the twins. Now, if we follow the sun, we will see that Venus is here entering the area near Hydra. Right over Hydra, and Venus will go into Virgo. Virgo and Hydra are right next to each other, almost the full length of Virgo. So again, we're going to center the sun and see how all of this plays out. Mercury, messenger Mercury, very important, entering into this sign, kind of emphasizing the war in heaven, emphasizing the rapture signs that had just taken place. This is July of this year as Venus and Mars have exited Cancer. Again, we are following the sun. And if I don't catch every sign, we will go over those at a later point. Mercury, a lot of times when you see or you read, and the angel said, or an angel cried out or roared, that's Mercury, the communicator, messenger Mercury, black planet, black horseman, typically in that sign. So you not only would you have the sun, but also that messenger as well. So we see Venus in conjunction with the sun over the water constellation of Hydra, right below Leo and just past Cancer. If we zoom out just a little bit, actually quite a bit, we will see Aquila. This is the living creature from the first horseman. You see Sagittarius in the lower left. This living creature called Sagittarius out, and then the sun went in conjunction with Jupiter over that planet 2019 in December when this mysterious virus was released. So we see that we've got the woman and we've got the eagle over here, and we've got the water snake representing that flood from Satan. And if we follow this through, we see that Venus is actually in retrograde from our perspective. Maybe not technically because it's closer, but I'm not going to get into the details of planets going into retrograde. Just looks like it's going backwards, and it's heading back into Cancer, perhaps representing those who are caught up, making a dichotomy, if you will, making a juxtaposition. Some will be caught up, and then some are going to be going through the flood of Hydra. But we know that the earth will open its mouth and help the woman. Interesting over here that we've got Comet Enki in the picture right over there. That has been suggested to have been part of the judgment from David's time when he did the census. And the angel of the Lord came and struck people down. There's been a study out there suggesting that that comet was actually going by at that time, releasing meteorites onto the earth. We've got crater, the mouth of crater right here, and that may be representing taking in some of this water. I'm not sure, but this is going into October 2023. As every October, the sun goes through this sign. Now, I'd like to jump back over here to Revelation 12:6, where it says, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." Now, if we plug that number, 1,260 days, into timedatecalendar.com, I believe is where I'm at, it takes us down to March 6, 2021. And a month later, at least in the United States, we had the injections, the vaccine released. So that could very well be what is being described here, that she was protected between the time of the Revelation 12 sign in 2017 up until 2021, where the injections, the vaccines were being released on people. That could be what is being described here. Now, obviously, you can't just put these 3.5 years next to the 3.5 years at the end of Revelation 12, but it does appear that things are happening chronologically. They are happening in context. We have that time of safety, and then we have some of those birth pains beginning. The increase in the weather phenomena and catastrophes, really natural disasters, as well as the uptick in the war. I guess in 2021, it would have been the start of the war with the second horseman being released, I think. Other people may argue whether or not the seals have been opened or not. And also trouble with the economy later in that year when Mercury is equipped. So lots of things happening that are reflected in Revelation chapter 12. And we saw the conjunction and then the opposition between Michael and his angels. I believe I've heard, at least one prophecy where that says that war is happening in the heavens right now as we speak, May 27th, 2023. And seeing the stars come to the earth, that may happen soon, may be represented with the sixth seal. Asteroids are part of that judgment. if we jump down here, picking up at verse 13, when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which had brought forth the man child. Now, if you recall on Paul Begley's channel a couple of weeks ago, Mike from around the world mentioned that Charles III has a code name, and that code name is the dragon. When he leaves, the phrase is the dragon has left his seat, for instance. So, in light of that, in addition to the fact that the coronation ceremony, for the first time ever, had a phrase in it that garnered a lot of backlash. Just reading the headline from CNN, Church of England changes wording of public declaration and King Charles III's coronation following backlash. And what the controversy is that it has always been an allegiance to the new monarch and his successors and heirs. These people in the ceremony have had to swear their allegiance to the king. But the Archbishop of Canterbury, who authorized the new liturgy, presented the plans to involve the public in the ceremony as a democratic initiative. So they're saying that the public will have to make this declaration as well, initially in the coronation, but my understanding is that there are long-term plans for the first time ever, allegiance to be required from the citizens of the United Kingdom and perhaps any colony of the British Empire. I'm not sure how deep this is going to run, but it definitely sets the stage up for no man can buy or sell without being a part of this system. Now, if we jump back to Revelation 12, we see the dragon cast to earth. Now, there is such a, let's say, theory about reptilians in the royal bloodline, a reptilian king, if you will. There is a Wikipedia on that, if anybody wants to look into that further. Basically, the story goes that, well, as I said earlier, there's a reptilian bloodline tied with the royal family. Let's go ahead and finish the chapter out. Verse 14, but to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and a half time from the presence of the serpent. So here we have the last 3.5 years. We go from the time of Jacob's sorrow, which is the easy 3.5 years of the tribulation, and then we transition into the time of Jacob's trouble with the last 3.5 years, that being the Great Tribulation. We go from the time of travail to the time of the extreme persecution. Verse 15, and and before I move on, the great eagle. This could be a reference to how the United States could be in Revelation itself. We're going to do a deeper dive into that, and we're going to pull in the book of Ezekiel, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Verse 15, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water after the woman like a flood, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, this obviously isn't going to be done physically by a human being, but a lot of people have had dreams, prophecies about great tsunamis, perhaps set off by a nuclear explosion under the sea, coming on to the United States, likely other countries as well. Verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had cast out of his mouth. Then the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went and made war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So when we saw Venus go retrograde over here, that could have been a sign of, that exposure, and then the woman being carried away, or at least part of that representation. The followers of Christ, the lukewarm, have to go back and face that water, that judgment, but they will be under the wings of the eagle Aquila. And Aquila is right over there, underneath the wings of Aquila, the two wings of Aquila. And this is also, okay, we've got wrath, and this is a wrath that God allows against those who keep the commandments of God. When we look over here at Stellarium, we see the cup of God's wrath right here, included in the latter half of that constellation of Hydra, the water snake. When we see that in Revelation 14 as well, the cup of God's wrath, but Venus is headed right toward that area of judgment. Once she passes through Virgo, she's going into the scales and then into Libra. So if we follow Venus, once Venus gets into the scales, I'm a little curious. She's going to be on the top side or the lower side. And it may just depend. So by early 2024, okay, so Venus is appearing to be on the more righteous side of the scales. Wonderful, excellent sign there. And Mercury is going in conjunction with the sun at the same time, emphasizing that sign. But she is still headed into Scorpio. Ophiuchus, Christ the Redeemer sign, is right above there, though. We also have Mars being strengthened by the sun, Mars and Mercury. And as we saw in Revelation chapter 1, these signs, these events will happen with quickness. So let's go ahead and close out. Lord, please show us great and marvelous things in your word. We are taken to the book of Isaiah. I do have quite a bit underlined in chapter 9. Lord, please bless the hearing of your word. I've just got to have a note. Let's see. Well, let's start with verse 3. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest. Oh, interesting. It's easy to focus on the judgment and forget about the harvest. Let me see. Verse 1. Let's just, because I have a note up here, I don't have an underline, but I do have a notation. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest. So when it says, but in the future he will honor Galilee, I have a note here that says that's where he spent most of his time in his ministry. In Galilee, the northern part of the country, away from Jerusalem, where he wouldn't face persecution from the Pharisees. So Revelation chapter 9, we did study this, and I have notes here from Revelation 8 and 9, Revelation 12, just all over the fig tree, Revelation chapter 6. So if you have a time, I'm going to go ahead and include this in the description as well, because just about the whole thing is underlined. And for time's sake, I'm just going to wrap things up. Dear God, thank you so much for your signs in the heavens, God, how they point to you. And this is your time to rule and reign and to come into your greatness. There's going to be times of tribulation, but there's a reason, there's a purpose. It's not just to us to focus on just getting by and getting through, but to be part of that harvest and walking into your kingdom, that new millennium, whatever that holds. You are going to be in charge, and we will rule and reign with you by your grace. Thank you, God. We love you. We praise you. Um, we hope that we are counted worthy, God, by your blood, Jesus, by the blood of your Son, Lord God. And we praise you and we thank you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.